It's long sleeve weather again, but I'm going to save you $300 on a rotor lift. And we'll chisel away some of the confusion surrounding chisels. This week on Blue Collar Woodworking.
The Great Particle Board build-off is in full swing at the Stumpy Nubs workshop, and it's already becoming an epic battle of woodworking titans.
Those guys over there think they're God's gift to woodworking just because they have fancy doodads like blade guards and dust masks. So when they poo-pooed a pile of particle board, well, there was no way I was going to let them get away with it. I was going to prove that there's a place in every workshop for inexpensive materials. Not everything has to be made out of mahogany and rosewood, especially around this place. So the challenge was on, and I was ready to meet it.
Since the first sheet came off the press in the post-World War II Germany, woodworkers have had a love-hate relationship with particle board. Low-cost furniture makers love its stability and the impact on their bottom lines. But woodworking purists despise its tendency to dull tools and a resistance to traditional joinery techniques. In the battle of perceptions, the purists have emerged victorious. Despite the addition of laminates and veneers, particle board is generally viewed as a material for those who can't afford real wood.
Back in the 50s, particle board was more expensive than solid wood. I mean, if you had particle board cabinets, you showed those suckers off to your friends. They'd think you're like Lawrence Welk or something because you could afford the best of the best. My parents couldn't afford particle board. Or socks.
Love it or hate it, particle board has changed the way furniture is made. Companies like IKEA have designed entire lines of furniture around the strengths and weaknesses of this versatile material. And with millions of pieces sold industry-wide, chances are you have a fair amount of particle board in your house.
No, I wouldn't say it's my first choice of materials, unless it's for a project for somebody I don't particularly like. I mean, my wife's cabinets aren't particle board, but the ones I made for old man Rabishaw down the street, particle board cabinets with duct tape hinges. Look, if you're going to compare particle board to solid wood, yeah, it's junk. But half the stuff we own is junk, isn't it? So unless you're going to throw out everything you have that came from Walmart, it's time to get down off your high horse and admit particle board has its place. And that was the whole point of this contest with the Bunyan brothers. They'd rather throw the stuff away than have anybody find out that they use something so terrible like particle board. A lot of woodworkers can't afford Baltic birch or things like that on their projects. So I wanted to prove that they could make something useful and nice out of particle board without having to be ashamed in the morning. As you know, I can't make any project without making some jig to go with it. This time, I was making these moldings to go on the edges of the particle board, and I thought this would be a lot easier with a rotor lift. But have you seen what they charge for these things? It's obscene. The router does all the work. It's the quarterback of the whole system. So why does the thing that just makes it go up and down cost 2 or 3 times as much? It's like Michael Vick. Sure, his dog trainers are important, but it's the quarterback that gets the big paycheck. I don't know. I've never been good at football metaphors, but I've always been good at making jigs. So I decided to try my hand at a rotor lift.
A rotor lift is a simple enough mechanism. It has some sort of crank to raise and lower the router from above the table, and a smooth tracking mechanism to keep everything aligned. Commercial models are precisely machined, which accounts for at least a portion of the high costs. Stumpy's solution is a $7 set of ball-bearing drawer slides.
Look, I read the message boards. I know that some people say that sawdust will foul up the bearings in these drawer slides. Baloney. I use them for all sorts of jigs, and they stay smooth and accurate in my experience. I've never had any problems with dust collection. I don't know, maybe if you've got sawdust just piling up on top of them, you'd have a problem, but that sounds more like a dust collection problem than a drawer slide problem. Besides, I plan on building dust collection right into this router lift. That's something the commercial versions don't have. You'll see. So the other day, I was browsing through my local woodworking store like I do all the time, and right before they threw me out for drinking too much of the free coffee, I saw a rack that had this little doodad on it. Now, I recognize the name, of course, Incra, because they make those table saw fences that everybody wants but are so expensive. They're expensive because they're accurate, and that's because they have this patented technology of interlocking teeth that keeps things really, really accurate and your measurements repeatable if you move away and then want to come back to the exact same one. Well, they applied that technology to this marking gauge, and I picked one up. It's just 2 pieces of plastic, but don't let it fool you. It's got those teeth on it and ruler marks. So when you set your distance, it's going to lock in exactly on the ruler marks to the thousandth of an inch, much more accurate than you can do just by eyesight. Once you tighten it down, then you can use it to mark the distance from an edge. You can turn it sideways and use it to mark the center line of a workpiece. You can use it as a height gauge for table saws or routers. Really, it's got all kinds of uses. There are a couple downsides to it though. For one thing, I would have liked to see the ruler marks on it a different color. They're kind of hard to see sometimes. And also, those teeth make it a little hard to adjust unless you really loosen up the nut. So if you can get past those, it is a good tool to have. And at 18 bucks, I don't know. It seems a little expensive to me for a couple pieces of plastic, but I'm glad I bought one.
Find everybody's favorite fat little woodworker on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and read his hilarious weekly woodworking blog at stumpynubs.com.
The Bunyan brothers were just here. I had to have Randy lay on top of the particle board project parts just to keep them out of their view. I mean, I know what they're doing. They're trying to find out what length of drywall screws I'm using. If they can't figure out particle board joinery on their own, that's their problem.
The weakness of any particle board project is the joinery. Traditional joints like the mortise and tenon do little to add strength. But understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of the material can go a long way toward making your project a success.
So, if you're going to take the plunge and use some particle board in a project, there are 5 rules that you have to follow, and these are non-negotiable. First of all, avoid long, unsupported spans. Spans of over 24 inches, especially if there's weight on them, will sag. So either do it shorter, use solid wood, or laminate 2 layers together. Second, screw and glue. Particle board holds together well with glue, but every joint should still be reinforced by screws with coarse threads. Number 3, pre-drill and countersink. Drilling a proper size pilot hole is critical, and countersinking heads will allow you to cover them with finish, and it'll keep that tapered end from splitting your particle board. Number 4, trim and paint. Unless you're going to veneer, you have to paint particle board. You can't just slap some stain on this. And plan on using wood trim anywhere an edge is going to be visible, because the edges don't look good painted. And number 5, don't move it. Particle board furniture's main weakness is moving it around. So try to make something that's going to be stationary, like built-in cabinets. Keeping these rules in mind right from the start will help you to determine from the design process what project to make from your particle board. And it will help you to avoid a project that people are going to laugh at when it falls apart. There are a few tools around the shop that Randy is just not allowed to use. Obviously the table saw, since the blade licking incident, but also my good chisels. I say good chisels because I also have some not so good chisels and some bad chisels. All are important for different reasons. First, the bad chisels. These came from Harbor Freight. They cost like $1 each. I never sharpen these things. They're the ones I keep around if I want to really just bang on something or I want to lend them to a neighbor. I just grind the chips out when they get them in the blades, no honing, that's it. I also have a set of Stanley Fat Max chisels. These things are actually pretty good quality. The steel is nice, it holds a nice edge, and there's a shank that runs all the way to the end that you can really bang on. So I use these if I have to do some mortising into some really hard wood that's going to damage some of the finer chisels. Then there's the really nice chisels, and I don't even keep them out because I like to have them around just to say I have something that Randy can't use. Of course, there's some other specialty chisels that some people like to have. Me, for example, I really like to have a set of short chisels around. These things are really nice. I always keep them razor sharp, and they work great for paring or for some really detailed handwork. If you do a lot of dovetailing by hand, you're going to want a set of dovetail chisels. Maybe 1 or 2 that are really thin and have steep bevels on the side so you can get in between those tails. Maybe you do mortising, you want a good heavy duty set of mortising chisels. The point is, there's lots of different chisels, and you have to tailor your collection to what you're most likely to use. And don't think you have to buy a full set of each. My dovetail chisels, I only have a couple different sizes that I use the most. My mortising chisels, I only have 3 different sizes, because those are really the only ones that I need. If you do that, then you're going to save a lot of money, and you can use that extra money to buy more good tools that you don't let your shop friends touch.
They need the entire weekend to build it because it's gigantic, and you're going to be, you want to go to Ohio because this is where we are now. So that would be a good artist in Ohio the day before.
Well, the particle board project is coming along great. We've got the carcasses all up and ready to paint. I'm pretty excited about it because this is saving me a fortune compared to what it would cost to make this out of good quality plywood. And once the trim is up, you're not going to be able to tell the difference unless you're a woodworker, which I suppose most of you are. But the average person that comes into the office, they're not going to know it's particle board, especially once I use this new paint sprayer that I got like 6 months ago. Been really excited to use, haven't had a chance yet. It's going to look nice. But then I got to get trim along the edges, and to make those I have to get this rotor lift finished. But I can't do that in the condition that this shop is in. So I'm going to have to take a break and do some cleaning. I'd have Randy do it, but he's just going to mess it up.
9 out of 10 one-armed men will tell you that a messy shop is dangerous. While it's inevitable that clutter will accumulate through the course of a project, it's important to stop from time to time and tidy things up. Put away tools you aren't using, discard wood scraps, make sure there's nothing on the floor to trip over. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it could save your life.
Rotor lift's done. Well, as done as I can show you because it's got to be mounted in a table for you to be able to see how it moves up and down. But guess what I made it out of? Particle board. Yeah, I'm getting some serious mileage out of this stuff. Actually, the critical parts are made out of good plywood or solid wood because it's going to see a lot of movement, of course, during use up and down. But some of it I use some particle board scraps. And since I use scraps and just a little bit of hardware, this thing cost me practically nothing. And it still moves up and down just as smoothly as the commercial versions. And you can adjust from the top of the table. It's kind of hard to see it on camera, but there's a little nut here that's just below the surface of your rotor plate. And I use a little ratchet that I bought at Harbor Freight for like $6. I keep a 3/4 inch socket on it, and that's what I use to raise and lower it. And then I can set it underneath the table when I'm done. You can change the bits from the top. You don't have to get underneath. And the best part is there's a 4-inch dust collection port in the back. That will pull enough air, hopefully, to suck any of the dust that gets below the table. And it's divided so that it also pulls air across the motor, which will keep my rotor cool. The commercial versions, I haven't seen one that has this. And I don't know why. I mean, it wasn't that big a deal to do.
Want to impress your friends? Then just go to stumpynubs.com and click on the tab that says Stumpy Store. There you'll find plans for many of the projects you see on Blue Collar Woodworking, and you can help support the show.
Now I'm thinking about a new router table fence. But I gotta really work on that trim for the particle board project, so that'll have to be for another time. Well, it's been another long day at the Stumpy Nubs workshop, but we've learned a few things. First, there's no need to be afraid of particle board. I mean, sure, it's kind of junk, but it can be used to make some good stuff, and very few people that use it get cancer. So don't be afraid to use it in some of your projects in your workshop. We also learned that the Bunyan brothers, bunch of jerks, will do anything to get an edge in this particle board contest. So I've got Randy going through the workshop right now, spreading dog poo all over the floor. So if they try to sneak in tonight, they're going to be in for a surprise. Of course, we've also learned that if you promise Randy a sandwich, he'll touch dog poo. I'm going to file that one away for future use. But before we close down for the night, I want to thank Jeff from Minneapolis, or JL7 as he goes on Lumberjacks, for this nice piece of bird's eye maple that he sent me. I'm going to make something nice out of it for Mrs. Stumpy. And then we'll all be able to sit back and have a cold one. Because you've earned it, my friend.